Employers. When did a quiet employee completely humiliate management in one move? Story 1. We had this guy, Kevin, never talked in meetings, showed up, did his work, went home. He wasn't shy, just reserved. Our new regional manager, Drew, loved to hear himself speak. Big ego, flashy suits, always belittling people to show dominance. One day, during an all-hands meeting, Drew pulls Kevin's latest quarterly numbers on the big screen and says, "This is what mediocrity looks like." Kevin just blinked, didn't defend himself, didn't even look embarrassed. 2 days later, Kevin submitted a 2-sentence resignation. His email CC'd to the COO, CFO, and head of data strategy. Turns out, Kevin had created half of the department's automation tools in his spare time, none of which were documented. Without him, entire processes collapsed, reports failed, forecasts froze, panic set in. And that's when Kevin made his next move. He joined a competitor. Within weeks, they had a better version of our reporting system. Clean, fast, and patent protected. Management? Humiliated. Drew was quietly reassigned. Kevin never raised his voice, but his exit was louder than any tantrum. Story 2. At our law firm, we had a junior accountant named Priya. Sweet, quiet, always in cardigans. She kept to herself, ate lunch at her desk, and always said, "Thank you." Management thought she was too soft, so they bypassed her for a promotion and gave it to Jason, the loud, charismatic guy who played golf with the partners. Jason immediately began micromanaging her work and, behind her back, took credit for all the budget streamlining Priya had done the previous year. Fast forward to our yearly audit. The external auditors flagged inconsistencies in Jason's financial reports. He blamed Priya, smugly saying, "She's nice, but she's just not detail-oriented." What he didn't know was that Priya had been maintaining a private log of every file edit, invoice correction, and communication trail, time-stamped and backed up on secure cloud storage. She handed everything to the auditors. In one move, she exposed Jason for padding expenses and double-dipping on reimbursements. Not only was he fired, he was reported to the CPA board. The board later released a memo citing internal integrity efforts, led by a junior staff member who exemplifies ethical accounting. That quiet woman made every partner in that firm take a long look in the mirror. Story 3. Marcus was a warehouse technician. Tall, silent, always with earbuds in. Management assumed he was just muscle, so they gave him grunt work and ignored his suggestions. During a logistics review, the COO demanded to know why packages were being delayed. The warehouse manager blamed worker error, specifically Marcus's line. Marcus stood up during the meeting, for once, pulled out a USB stick, and calmly plugged it into the room's projector. It was a complete visual simulation of the warehouse's layout, worker movement, and a detailed optimization plan. It turned out Marcus had been studying data and mapping heat zones in his off time. His proposed plan cut loading times by 30%. His line wasn't slow. The layout was. You could hear a pin drop. By the end of the month, Marcus was promoted to logistics analyst and now trains managers. The old warehouse manager resigned 2 weeks later. Story 4. We had a graphic designer named Leah. Very quiet, took feedback with a smile, never pushed back. Management constantly dumped last-minute projects on her, assuming she'd just do whatever was asked. One day, during a big pitch to a new luxury brand client, our creative director presented a campaign deck. The client flipped through it and said, "This is awful. Where's the concept Leah showed me last week?" Turns out, Leah had been freelancing with this client on her own time before they even approached our company. She'd built the entire brand identity that made them want to work with us. They thought we were pitching her work. Management had no clue. The client walked out furious. Leah stood up, smiled politely, and said, "I'll be taking them with me. We already have a contract." She quit that day, took the biggest potential account we had, and founded her own studio. Her face was on an industry magazine cover 6 months later. Story 5. Tom was the IT guy no one really noticed. Polite, kept servers running, said little. Then came a merger, and with it, a consultant-heavy management team that decided to trim fat. Tom's position was marked as non-essential. On his final day, a farewell lunch was planned, but Tom didn't show. Instead, at 2:03 p.m., every screen in the office suddenly displayed a single message. "This is what your security looks like without me," followed by a real-time list of internal vulnerabilities. Nothing malicious, just a sobering visual walkthrough of what he'd been silently patching every week. The CIO, one of the few who respected Tom, was furious. She demanded to know who authorized the cut. The consultants stuttered, and 2 of them were dismissed by end of day. Tom, rehired under a new title, Director of Information Security. He never raised his voice. He just let his work scream for itself. Story 6. Ellen was a part-time copy editor at our publishing house. Mid-40s, no social media, always brought her lunch. Upper management referred to her as background furniture during a meeting once. She was in the room and they didn't realize. When a junior marketing director launched an ad campaign filled with errors and lazy slogans, the client, a major national brand, was furious. In the crisis meeting, the director tried to shift blame by saying, "I sent the draft to our editors. Ellen saw it and didn't flag anything." Ellen quietly pulled out her folder and laid down a printed copy of the campaign, marked with handwritten suggestions, rewrites, and red flags, all dated and signed. Then she pulled out an email printout showing that the director had replied, "I'll handle this my way. We're going for bold." The client looked at the director and asked, "So ignoring professional advice was your bold strategy?" They pulled the account. The director was gone the next day. Ellen, given a full-time position and her own corner office, she still brings her lunch. Story 7. Jorge worked in building maintenance, silent, efficient, barely noticed. Our office building had a fancy biometric security system that a new VP had installed to look modern and cutting edge. It cost a fortune. It also malfunctioned constantly. One day, the system locked half the executive team inside the conference wing during a client visit. Phones weren't working, doors wouldn't budge. Panic. Eventually, Jorge was called in just to try something. He walked up, reached behind a panel, flipped a manual override switch that no one else knew about, and unlocked every door. When asked how he knew about it, he said flatly, "I read the actual manual when it was installed." Then he pulled out a report he'd sent 6 months earlier, warning about this exact failure. The VP had marked it as low priority. The client witnessed the entire ordeal. They later remarked, "Your janitor runs this place better than your VP." The VP didn't survive the week. Jorge got a retention bonus and a new job title, Facilities Systems Supervisor. Story 8. There was a quiet data analyst at our fintech startup named Iris. Never participated in small talk. Always wore noise-canceling headphones. When a major investor requested risk exposure reports, the CFO presented an overly optimistic outlook, smoothing over potential market risks. Iris didn't say a word during the presentation, but that evening she uploaded a password-protected report to the investor's private dashboard, something she was quietly assigned to do. That report included every flagged data inconsistency she'd found over the last year, charts, source logs, and trend models that the CFO had ignored. She didn't editorialize, just raw truth. 2 weeks later, the investor pulled out. Board members demanded an internal audit. The CFO resigned before it was complete. The kicker? Iris didn't even know the impact she had until HR called her in and said, "They want to offer you the director role. Also, thank you for saving the company." Story 9. Caleb was an art handler at a major gallery. Soft-spoken, never late, took immense care with every piece. A flashy new curator joined and started moving exhibits around without consulting the preservation staff. Caleb tried to warn her that one of the light exposures was damaging an original pastel, but she brushed him off. A month later, during an opening gala, the artist himself attended and noticed the discoloration. Furious, he called out the damage loudly in front of donors and board members. Before the curator could defend herself, Caleb stepped forward, handed the artist a binder full of environmental logs, humidity data, and emails, all showing that he'd warned about the setup multiple times. The artist turned to the curator and said, You endangered my work and ignored your own staff. Unforgivable. She was escorted out before the event ended. Caleb now oversees all conservation planning. His name is etched into the staff plaque by the entrance. Story 10. Tina worked in payroll. Always polite, always early, extremely detail-oriented. A new HR director came in and decided to modernize the payroll system. She outsourced it to a third-party firm despite Tina warning that they lacked experience with international tax law. A month later, over 70 employees in the European branch were issued incorrect tax forms. It led to penalties, angry emails, and union complaints. The director panicked and tried to claim Tina failed to prepare transition documentation. In an emergency meeting, Tina asked if she could share her screen. She opened a private SharePoint archive labeled "For When They Blame Me," which contained the full training videos, tax compliance workflows, and a step-by-step implementation guide, all time-stamped a month before the migration. The CEO stared at the HR director and said, "So, she gave you all of this and you ignored it?" Tina didn't have to say a word. The HR director was dismissed. Tina now oversees payroll strategy globally, and she still signs every email with "Warm regards." Story 11. We had an old-school mailroom guy named Dennis. Been with the company 22 years. Everyone liked him, but nobody really paid attention to him. He delivered mail, fixed jammed printers, and quietly watched the office drama unfold. One day, corporate brought in a new COO, fresh out of Silicon Valley. She decided to go paperless and eliminated the mailroom, Dennis included. He was given a retirement package and a farewell card. 2 weeks later, chaos broke out. Legal missed 3 court deadlines. Sales didn't receive signed vendor contracts. HR's background check documents disappeared. Turns out Dennis wasn't just delivering mail. He was manually routing physical documents between departments, many of which had legal restrictions against digital-only storage. An internal investigation revealed the COO had never reviewed any operational procedures. She thought the mailroom was just delivering magazines. Dennis, he was invited back on a consulting basis for triple his original pay. He returned in a sharp blazer, calmly sipping coffee while re-educating execs about their own systems. No one ever underestimated the mail guy again. Story 12. Arjun worked in R&D as a mechanical engineer. Barely spoke a word, kept a bonsai tree at his desk, and listened to classical music with noise-canceling headphones. A new department head came in swinging, wanted aggressive product rollout, and trashed Arjun's latest design for being too cautious. In the next product iteration meeting, the flashy prototype from the new team was shown. Arjun was silent. When asked if he had concerns, he simply said, "I created a simulation you might want to see." He plugged in his laptop. The simulation showed their new design failing spectacularly under real-world stress tests, bursting seals, structural failure, battery fire risk. The room went dead silent. Arjun calmly added, "I ran this analysis a month ago. It's in the shared folder, page 7, then unplugged and left the meeting." The product was immediately shelved. The head of R&D was removed from launch planning. Arjun, quietly promoted to lead engineer. Still waters run deep, and sometimes they design better machines. Story 13. Maya worked in procurement. She didn't speak much at meetings, didn't hang out at lunch, and never gossiped. But she had a reputation for catching errors before anyone else did. A new CFO decided to centralize all vendor relations and bypassed Maya for a younger, louder candidate who had better people skills. Maya wasn't even told. She found out when her login credentials were revoked. She didn't protest. Instead, she filed a report with internal audit attaching 14 months of vendor correspondence. She flagged duplicate invoices, personal spending under fake vendors, and internal collusion. The flashy new hire? Neck deep in it? The board was called in. Auditors confirmed everything. The CEO addressed it publicly, praising the whistleblower's diligence and integrity. Maya didn't gloat. She accepted her new title, Head of Compliance, and went right back to quietly organizing files. But everyone walked a little straighter around her after that. Story 14. There was a guy named Todd in our IT department. Nerdy, quiet, never looked anyone in the eye, just kept things running. When a department head's son was hired as an IT intern, he started pushing buttons, literally. Deleted backups, rewrote firewall rules, and tried to install a cryptocurrency miner on a company server. Todd didn't say anything, he just documented. Then, one Monday morning, the entire internal network crashed. Productivity halted. The VP stormed into the server room blaming Todd. Without saying a word, Todd handed him a folder labeled Unauthorized Activities, Intern's Name, and a USB stick. The folder contained full logs, screenshots, and a camera recording of the intern physically removing hard drives. By 2 p.m., the intern was escorted out by security. By 3 p.m., Todd was in the CTO's office being offered a raise, a promotion, and complete autonomy over IT hires moving forward. He didn't even smile, just nodded and went back to his desk. Story 15. Natalie worked in guest services at a 5-star hotel. Polished, discreet, soft-spoken. She memorized repeat guests' coffee orders and knew which side each preferred their pillows fluffed. Management treated her like part of the decor. One day, a VIP guest's event went sideways. His catered dinner was swapped with another booking, and the executive manager tried to deflect the blame onto Natalie in front of the client. She was in charge of the checklists, he claimed. Natalie didn't argue. Instead, she asked the guest for a moment, then returned with a printout of internal logs, timestamps, and surveillance screenshots showing that the manager had approved the switch himself to accommodate another guest he was dating. The VIP read the logs, stood up, and announced, "If she goes, my entire partnership goes with her." Management crumbled. The executive was removed the same week. Natalie, promoted to guest experience director. She still doesn't raise her voice, but when she speaks, everyone listens. Story 16. Lena worked as a junior compliance officer at a global insurance company. She was quiet, polite, and always on time. Management barely acknowledged her beyond brief nods. When new executives decided to launch a fast-track international partnership, Lena raised a few soft objections, concerned about overseas licensing and consumer protection laws. She was told to stay in her lane. A month later, just days before the rollout, Lena submitted a sealed memo directly to the board's legal counsel. Inside, detailed documentation of potential violations, screenshots of internal messages showing the execs knew they were skipping mandatory regulatory steps, and predictions of multi-million-dollar fines. The rollout was paused. Lawyers confirmed everything. A private emergency board meeting followed. 3 executives resigned, and Lena was summoned in, not for reprimand, but for a promotion. She now leads a team of 5. Her tone hasn't changed, still calm. But now, when she says something, no one dares ignore it. Story 17. At a mid-sized tech firm, Matt was a technical writer, an unglamorous position in the eyes of upper management. When the CTO announced a flashy new software upgrade to investors, he hyped it as fully secure and AI integrated. Matt knew otherwise. He had helped draft the documentation, and new features were incomplete and unsecured. During the investor Q&A session, Matt stood up unexpectedly and asked, "Have the stakeholders been shown the known risk registry for the AI module?" The room froze. The CTO's face turned white. Matt walked to the projector and pulled up the internal database. There it was. Months of risk logs, test results, and flagged vulnerabilities, all marked pending fix. He hadn't leaked anything, just asked the right question at the right time. The fallout was immediate. The rollout was delayed, investors demanded audits, and Matt was offered a transition role into product oversight. He still prefers writing over meetings, but now he's the final reviewer for every public claim. Story 18. Khalid was an assistant librarian in a private academy. Soft-spoken, always with a clipboard, students loved him. Administration? Not so much. They slashed the library budget, fired a few assistants, and told Khalid to digitize everything in 2 months or face being let go. They assumed he'd fail. What they didn't know was that Khalid had already started scanning and categorizing the rare book collection over the last 2 years, on his own time. When the board visited for a scheduled inspection, expecting dusty shelves and excuses, Khalid led them to a password-protected portal. He had built a full digital archive, searchable by theme, author, publication year, even cross-linked by curriculum relevance. The board was stunned. The principal tried to take credit, but Khalid simply opened an About page with his name and time-stamped records of his independent work. Parents began requesting access. Donations poured in. The principal was removed a semester later. Khalid, made director of archival services? Story 19. Trisha worked in customer service at a logistics firm. She rarely spoke during meetings, but always followed up with immaculate emails. Her manager constantly took credit for process improvements and ignored her direct suggestions. During a company-wide contest for Best Operational Efficiency idea, Trisha submitted an automated response system for shipment delays, internally coded, tested, and integrated by her on her own laptop. Her manager laughed, saying it was too technical for her to pull off. At the final presentation, the judges invited Trisha up. She walked them through a live demo, including client chat logs showing 60% faster resolution times. Then came the twist. She showed time-stamped internal emails where her manager had dismissed the same idea months earlier, calling it wasted energy. The room turned on him instantly. Trisha won the contest, a $15,000 bonus, and was offered a lateral promotion to a new department. Her manager was quietly demoted. Story 20. Don worked security at a large data center. Former military, always quiet, always alert. Management considered him just the badge guy. When they hired an outside firm to audit physical vulnerabilities, Don wasn't consulted. During the security presentation, the firm boasted about their penetration test and claimed Don let someone through a back door without verification. Don sat silently, then calmly handed the CIO a sealed envelope. Inside, surveillance photos, a duplicate visitor badge, and a memo he filed before the audit warning about badge forgery flaws. He then pulled out a body cam video showing that the test actor never passed through his station. He'd caught the fake at the side exit and quietly detained him until cleared. The audit firm's contract was immediately canceled. Don promoted to head of site security. He doesn't say much, but when he does, people listen like their jobs depend on it. Story 21. Sylvia was an assistant in the legal department of a real estate investment firm. She spoke rarely, wrote perfectly, and was practically invisible during meetings. A hotshot VP was fond of calling her the human paperclip. When the firm entered negotiations for a 9-figure property deal, the VP led the effort with lots of flair. Sylvia, who had been quietly reading the contract drafts, noticed a clause that would have made the company responsible for environmental damages dating back 40 years. She emailed the VP, no response. On signing day, just as the VP was handing over the contract to the sellers, Sylvia calmly stepped forward and asked, "Have we received the revised indemnity clause yet?" The VP blinked. The sellers froze. She pulled out a hard copy of the original clause and explained the liability exposure in under a minute. The CEO demanded an immediate pause. Legal reviewed it and confirmed signing the document would have opened the company to potentially $200 million in claims. The deal was renegotiated. Sylvia got a promotion and a huge retention bonus. The VP reassigned to special projects out of state. Story 22. Andy worked in the backroom IT support team of a university. Quiet, polite, always reading logs while sipping cheap instant coffee. When a new CIO arrived and started outsourcing critical functions to an external vendor, Andy warned about security concerns. He was ignored. Worse, he was excluded from meetings. Then came the breach. Sensitive faculty and student data was compromised. The vendor blamed internal mishandling. Andy didn't argue. Instead, he handed the chancellor a thick binder with printed access logs, email threads, and a timeline. Every instance of poor vendor practice was highlighted. Then came the final page. A list of security patches Andy had submitted before the vendor went live, all marked pending or unnecessary by the new CIO. Within days, the vendor contract was canceled and the CIO forced to resign. Andy didn't give a speech. He just asked for a new monitor. His had been flickering for weeks. Story 23. Lori worked as a packaging line inspector at a cosmetic products manufacturer. Very quiet. Took notes on a little clipboard, wore oversized glasses, and said, "Excuse me," even when nobody was near her. A new operations manager decided the inspection process was slowing down production and introduced a new streamlined protocol, cutting Lori's role to half-time. Lori didn't protest. She just started tracking rejected shipments at the retailer level. 3 months later, one of the company's biggest clients threatened to pull their contract over dozens of defective units reaching shelves. During the crisis meeting, the manager blamed Lori's lack of attention. Lori pulled out a spreadsheet. It tracked every error, correlated directly to skipped inspection protocols with timestamps and batch numbers. She also included photographic evidence from her own phone. Every faulty product type matched a date she'd been off duty. The CEO stared at the manager. "You cut the safety net, and now you're blaming the fall?" The manager was fired. Lori was reinstated full-time with a team reporting to her. Story 24. Sean worked in event logistics at a convention center. Very low profile, always in black, with a clipboard in one hand and a headset in the other. Management viewed him as just a floor guy. During a high-profile tech conference, a new event director misallocated booth spaces, causing a dispute between two major sponsors. Sean tried warning her beforehand that her layout broke fire code and union guidelines, but she brushed him off. Opening day, chaos erupted. Equipment was misplaced, trucks were blocked, and vendors threatened legal action. The director panicked. Sean walked into the operations tent, pulled out a printed plan he had drawn up, compliant, efficient, and approved by the union a week prior. He had submitted it through proper channels, but it was ignored. He handed it to the fire marshal and quietly said, "If you'd like to avoid evacuation, this version works." The marshal used his plan. The sponsors stayed. The event director didn't. Sean, quietly promoted to event logistics coordinator. Still wears black, but now people salute when he enters the room. Story 25. Jamie was a QA tester at a mobile app company. She rarely joined the group lunches, preferred Slack over meetings, and was known for filing overly detailed bug reports. A new product manager mocked her novels during a team meeting and labeled her work a drain on dev resources. Jamie didn't push back, she just kept documenting. On launch day, the app hit #1 on the store, but by evening, users were reporting data loss and login issues. Social media exploded. Review bombs, PR nightmare. During the postmortem, Jamie simply shared her final QA report. Every bug the app was now experiencing had been logged by her 2 weeks before launch. The final page was her Slack message to the PM titled, "These will cause real-world user damage." The CTO sat in silence, then said, "From now on, nothing ships unless Jamie signs off." The PM resigned that week. Jamie now leads the QA department, and her bug reports required reading. Story 26. Tomoko was a mild-mannered translator at an international consulting firm. She quietly sat in meetings, typed diligently, and always greeted people with a soft nod. A new VP, loud, aggressive, and notoriously dismissive, once asked, "Why are we paying someone to do Google Translate with a personality?" During a pitch to secure a massive Japanese client, the VP insisted on using his own slides, half of which had machine-translated text he pulled from free software. Tomoko requested a review before the meeting. He brushed her off. During the presentation, the client stared, baffled. One slide, meant to read seamless integration, translated instead to invisible bodily merging. Another, intended to say scalable strategy, read as expandable belly plan. Embarrassed, the VP tried to salvage it, but Tomoko stood, apologized in fluent Japanese, and delivered the entire pitch herself from memory. She explained the errors, clarified the real intention, and answered technical questions on the spot. The client clapped. The VP was benched. Tomoko now leads the cross-cultural division. Story 27. Craig was an entry-level accountant. Never raised his voice, never stayed past 5. He was so quiet that the department head often joked, "I forget Craig works here until tax season." One quarter, leadership announced a new incentive program. Hit 20% under budget on expense reports, and you get a bonus. Everyone rushed to slash costs, except Craig. He kept submitting well-documented reports, slightly over target. The department head ridiculed him in front of the team. Some people just don't know how to play the game. Then came the audit. Craig's files were spotless, but many of the optimized reports had fake entries, double reimbursements, and creative math. Worse, the bonus system had incentivized fraud. One report even had a $400 dinner receipt listed under light snacks. Craig. He had filed a confidential alert to internal audit weeks earlier with exact names and discrepancies. The department head was fired. Craig quietly promoted to senior compliance auditor. Story 28. Naomi worked reception at a prestigious architecture firm. She was soft-spoken, helpful, and almost always overlooked. That changed the day an international client flew in, one who spoke only Spanish. None of the execs spoke a word. The client sat awkwardly while they stumbled through Google Translate. An hour passed with almost no progress. Naomi, while refilling coffee, leaned in and asked the client in fluent Spanish if she could help. Their entire face lit up. She smoothly took over as translator, bridging cultural gaps, clarifying timelines, even explaining building specs using architectural terminology. The client later sent a glowing review titled, "The woman at the front desk saved the entire deal." Management was stunned. Naomi, it turned out, held a dual degree in Spanish literature and architectural theory, info that had been on her resume from day one. They just never looked. Now she's head of international client relations. Story 29. Igor was a warehouse loader, strong, silent, and known only for nodding and working fast. A new logistics manager introduced a fancy AI system to optimize routes, claiming it would replace outdated muscle memory. After 2 months, the system caused more delays than improvements. Drivers were late, boxes misplaced, and client complaints piled up. Igor kept loading boxes in his original manual pattern, which often ended up being faster. The manager grew annoyed and demanded Igor follow the system. Igor complied. A week later, during a leadership tour, everything went wrong. Delayed shipments, trucks off route, inventory mismatches. The regional director asked Igor if he had suggestions. He calmly nodded, grabbed a marker, and drew his original route pattern on the whiteboard. Time, distance, fuel, lift reduction, he said for the first time in months. It was more efficient than the AI's entire map. They scrapped the system. Igor now trains new logistics hires. Management still doesn't know how he figured it all out, but they listen when he speaks. Story 30. Becca worked in internal communications at a tech startup. She was known for her quiet demeanor and obsessively tidy desk. Her suggestions were often ignored in favor of louder voices. The company was about to roll out a rebranding campaign, led by a cocky marketing director who refused input from non-creative departments. Becca warned in a short email that one of the new slogans, "We own your data," was problematic. He laughed. It's edgy. On launch day, tech news outlets destroyed the campaign. Twitter exploded with jokes, memes, and privacy watchdogs tagging regulators. The CEO demanded to know who approved the phrase. Becca forwarded the email thread, her warning, his reply, and the timestamp showing she had flagged the exact issue weeks ago. The director tried to blame design. Legal shut him down. He was gone by Monday. Becca, promoted to brand integrity advisor. Still doesn't talk much, but now she has veto power on all messaging. Story 31. Marvin worked in building maintenance for a corporate headquarters with over 900 employees. People barely noticed him unless something broke. A new facility director came in from a tech company and decided to install smart motion sensors to reduce energy usage. The lights started turning off mid-meeting. Bathrooms went dark during use. Hallways became haunted mazes. Marvin warned him that the system wasn't suitable for large buildings with irregular traffic patterns, but the director laughed and told him to stick to plungers. Then came the day an executive tripped in a dark stairwell and broke her wrist. Legal was called. A safety hearing was scheduled. Marvin walked in with a flash drive and quietly showed surveillance footage, legal use since it was company-owned, maintenance reports, and time-stamped emails with ignored warnings, including one that stated exactly which stairwell would cause injury due to the faulty delay. There was dead silence. Marvin didn't say anything else. The smart system was ripped out. The director was fired within the week. Marvin? Put in charge of all future infrastructure projects. They still call him the janitor, but now with a lot more respect. Story 32. Esther was an older administrative assistant at a fast-paced media agency. Most of the younger staff saw her as old-fashioned and behind the times. The creative director often barked orders at her and left her out of key meetings. One day, just before a huge client pitch, the director discovered the presentation drive was corrupted. The backup on the cloud? Gone due to syncing issues. Panic! Everyone scrambled. Esther stood up, pulled a small portable hard drive from her drawer, and said, "Would you like the final version or the revised one?" Everyone blinked. She had saved every version of every file. Not only that, she had made a clean version with no tracked changes, brand colors corrected, and every embedded video file preloaded offline. The client saw the pitch. They signed on the spot. Afterward, the CEO asked Esther why she went to such lengths. She simply replied, "I've seen this kind of panic before. I just prepared for it." Now every new hire is trained with her organizational methods. The director, quietly told to treat support staff like partners, or leave. Story 33. David was the in-house legal reviewer at a regional supermarket chain. Very quiet, rarely in meetings unless required. The company launched a flashy new loyalty app after months of development, hyped by marketing and tech. David had submitted concerns about data collection language in the terms of service, which were dismissed as over-lawyering by the product lead. The app launched. Within a week, a privacy advocacy group launched a formal complaint. The app was collecting location data without proper consent disclosures, in direct violation of state law. The board was furious. The CEO demanded to know how this could have happened. David, seated at the end of the table, calmly opened his binder. Inside were marked copies of the original policy, his annotated revisions, and an email chain where the product team wrote, "We'll leave this out for now. It's too wordy." The app was pulled. Fines were avoided only because David's draft had been archived in the company records, proving intent to correct. He now reviews everything: legal, marketing, even internal training docs. He still speaks softly, but his words carry more weight than any VP in the room. Story 34. Luca worked in catering support at a large conference center. He was shy, always in the back prepping trays or silently replacing drinks. The event manager, flashy and overconfident, once called him the human vending machine. One high-profile event included a live televised awards dinner. The manager forgot to mention a key change to the food schedule. An allergy-sensitive table required a nut-free meal. He didn't inform the kitchen, Luca overheard. He quietly reorganized the plating tags, checked the tray routing, and flagged the allergy plate with an unmistakable red marker. 10 minutes before serving, he stopped a server carrying the wrong dish and swapped it. Nobody noticed, until the end of the night when the award-winning guest tweeted, "Thanks to your team for saving me from an allergic reaction. Whoever caught the peanut issue is a hero." The manager tried to take credit, but Luca's actions were all captured on a hallway camera. When the footage surfaced, the truth was undeniable. The manager was demoted. Luca, promoted to dietary safety lead. Still quiet, still watching, still saving lives. Story 35. Michelle was a compliance intern at a major pharmaceutical company. Just out of college, nervous, barely spoke unless spoken to. During a safety data audit, she flagged a batch of clinical results that didn't align with prior data. Her supervisor brushed her off, saying the data had already been approved by higher-ups. "Focus on filing," he told her. Michelle decided to dig deeper, on her own time. She built a spreadsheet, compared trial phases, and uncovered an error in the efficacy calculation. The formula had been copied incorrectly during a pivot to a new software platform. She submitted her findings to the compliance hotline anonymously. A month later, a federal audit began. The company narrowly avoided a lawsuit because Michelle's report allowed them to recall the submission and issue corrected data. The supervisor was caught falsifying approval logs to meet a deadline. Michelle's identity eventually came out. Instead of being reprimanded, she was offered a full-time role and was invited to present at an internal ethics summit. She spoke for 7 minutes, then quietly sat down. The applause lasted twice as long. Story 36. Monica was the front desk administrator for a medium-sized design firm. She was reserved, organized, and often ignored by upper management unless they needed coffee or directions. A new COO with a flashy resume started bragging about a major government contract he'd secured for the company. He used it as leverage to slash costs, citing guaranteed revenue. Monica overheard him giving a TV interview about it, mentioning specifics of the deal that sounded strangely off. She quietly contacted the firm's government liaison using her access to appointment calendars and confirmed that no such deal had been finalized. Just an exploratory call. She printed the memo from the agency, with the official seal, and dropped it on the CEO's desk the next morning. The board held an emergency meeting. The COO had exaggerated not only the contract, but also his role in initial negotiations. He was fired within the week. Monica, given a new title, Executive Operations Coordinator. Now the CEO asks her when he needs clarity on a meeting. Story 37. Raj was a junior software developer who barely spoke during stand-ups. He preferred headphones and code. A new development manager came in with a corporate buzzword addiction and decided to replace the team's core API with an AI-enhanced microservice solution he purchased from a third party. Raj warned him once, quietly, that the new service hadn't been benchmarked and might break under stress. The manager laughed. "We're not in the Stone Age anymore." 2 weeks later, during a national product launch, the back-end collapsed under load. Thousands of users were locked out. Clients demanded refunds. Raj, calmly and without fanfare, activated his own clone of the old system that he'd kept updated on a private branch. In minutes, the product was back online, thanks to a silent hot swap. The CTO asked, "Why wasn't this flagged earlier?" Raj simply replied, "It was. You were CCC'd." The manager was let go. Raj was promoted. He still doesn't say much, but now people read every word he writes. Story 38. Haley worked in visual merchandising at a luxury retail chain. She wasn't flashy and rarely attended after-work social events. Her designs were clean, minimalist, and she always hit deadlines. A trendy creative director took over and began mocking her displays as too safe, replacing them with his own over-the-top visuals. Sales plummeted. The flagship store lost foot traffic and return customers. Management blamed poor footfall, economic trends, anything but the displays. Haley asked for one shot to redesign the front window. She stayed late, pulled together her old materials, and crafted a new minimalist display using eco-friendly pieces and lighting contrast. No fanfare, no announcement. Within 72 hours, sales surged. People posted selfies in front of her display on social media. It went viral. The director claimed credit until Haley quietly showed the regional manager the time-stamped design files and her video logs. The director was transitioned to consulting. Haley now oversees brand presentation across 3 states.